are people interested in using foam for?
Armour, mostly.
Yeah.
Padding stuff out and
Padding
then
stuff
putting
out,
like
good.
hard armour on the outside
Excellent.
of it.
Yeah. Okay, so very, very basically, there are two kinds of foam that one can get hold of for use in cosplay. There are the soft, squishy cell foams with little holes in, and there's various kinds of those, but take home is you carve them. And then there are the slightly denser sort of closed cell foams, like plastazote, and what you tend to do with those is you make a sort of a shell out of them. And that's your basic sort of difference between the kinds of foam. So, yeah, I'm just saying, you've got your open squishy foams and then your closed sort of zote type foams. If you could just open that bag up, actually, that white bag for me. Yes. So what we're going to do today is I'm going to show you how one would construct a sort of shell type armour out of a plastazote type foam. You can hand those out, we can keep those because that's just for flipping around at home. That's all the scraps and you'll last a lot of years. So this is a material called plastazote. It's a synthetic foam made from basically a sort of plastic, but it's soft. It's a lot like craft foam, but it comes in any thickness from 2mm to, I think they do up to 25, so an inch thick. Obviously, that's quite useful for doing cosplay and stuff. So what I'm going to say is, come gather around this table, and I will show you how zote can be used in combination with a Pepakura type 3D flattened pattern. So, does everyone know what Pepakura is? Okay, does everyone know what papercraft is? Right, you know how if you get a 3D model, it's sort of all got curves and shit on it, but you can sort of flatten it out and put darts in, and it gets flat. That's what that is. So what I'm going to do is use foam to make a Pokemon. And that should turn, I haven't tested it, but that should hopefully turn into a little 3D model of a Pikachu head. This is Evo Stick. If one was using it from a tin, or in a more enclosed space, one would want to wear a respirator. But this is a fairly small amount, in a tube, should be fine in a big room like this. Now there is a very special trick to using Evo Stick. It involves... Right, what should we do first? Let's do the face first. So, this is Pikachu's face. As you can see, it's flat, but I want it to be 3D. So, what I will do is I will glue up all the darts so it curves around. Then I will glue it to his face, and then I will wrap everything around.
Okay.
Yep.
Fairly simple.
This is the sort of thing one would do. You can already smell the stuff. Evo Stick is magic because you do not just glue it and then put the two halves together. You glue it, just a tiny little bit. We got like a cocktail stick or something.
Sure, we've got a bit of paper.
Bit of card, that'd be best. So, put a tiny little bit on each side, and then you spread it on, and then you leave it.
The trick is to have a thin veneer.
Very, very thin coat, but on both sides that you're going to stick. That is the trick with Evo Stick. Because you spread it, and you go, right.
You don't want to put it on the dart.
Forget it.
You need an object to put it on. All good?
Yep. So that is weighting, because this is a contact adhesive. Do you know what that means? What it means is a thin layer on each half, and then put it to one side for 3 or 4 minutes, let it become touch dry, and then it will stick when you make contact again.
Yes.
Yes. So this is the sort of thing one might want to make armour out of. It's this plastazote type foam. You can tell we're sort of winning this panel a little bit. So, we'll have a little more chat about plastazote. What can one do with plastazote?
All sorts.
Such as?
So,
We've got the heat gun. Do some heat for me.
yes. You can make, like what we're doing here, you can make
You can make swords out of it by laminating it up.
That's not a meat gun.
Yeah. I only got.
So if you also get the blue, if you get the tray and the blue towel, that should both be in the box, just to stop us killing the table. Because we're good like that. How long's it been? So we'll have a feel of that. It's not quite there, but it's nearly there. So if I touch, if I touch that, right, it's not sticky. But you can tell there's glue on there, but it's not actually sticky. So it's just in the little along the top. See where it's yellow? Yeah, you gotta, don't smell it. I mean, this stuff, you know, I've used it for years without proper respiration, it's fine, but you do want to, you know, if you're going to be using it in any quantity, you want to have a well-ventilated room and you want the proper organic respirator. The only reason I haven't got it today is because you really can't talk in them.
To be honest, my philosophy always is, if the tin doesn't say it's going to absolutely murder you, at least smell it once, so you know what it smells like. So if you walk into a room and go, that's strange, I can smell something really strong, you know what's open.
That's not my philosophy. So I reckon that's probably ready. So what we do is we very gently from the bottom up pinch them together. And if everything's gone as it should have gone, it bites. Same with that. It's gone as I want it to have gone. It should hopefully bite. Yeah, it's missed a little bit at the top, so I'll redo that in a sec. And the nice thing with Evo stickers, it's very grippy. Once you've got your quantity right, and once you've got everything ready to go, it should actually bite very hard. And then
anything you can do to unglue it?
No. Other than cut down the edge.
Are there not solvents that will?
No, you'll probably melt the plastazote.
Yeah. So I'll do the same here. So pop it together. It should be ready. If it's not ready, it won't bite. If it's ready, it will bite. See? That's really strong. And then it'll get stronger over the next 24 hours, and after that, it should be pretty much bulletproof.
Quite often, the glued seam is stronger than the material itself.
Yeah. Not so much with the Zote side, but with the other foam, very much so. This is what I would also use on the upholstery foam, the open cell foams.
You're likely to just utterly rip the foam before you will split.
Yeah,
the
it depends
seam.
how well you've glued it. You know, and if your glue's a little bit older and the solvent's gone a bit funny, you can sometimes not work so well. But if the glues work properly, yeah, it's stronger than foam, which is kind of handy.
I mean, if you're running on a budget as well, and you're super careful and very, very
Could
patient.
you crack the door open? This stuff does huff a bit.
Yeah, if you're super patient and.
I knew a guy who used to work with this shit in basically a broom closet for days at a time, and he's fine.
You can glue plastazote with hot glue, but
it's a pain in the bum.
It's a lot harder to do because you have to hold it in position.
Yeah.
What you can do is a clever technique I came up with called I've called it seam binding. In fact, I call it inverse seam binding, which is a really, really cool sounding thing. So, like, if I steal that
Have you
piece
got
of
any sticky
plastic
tape?
there,
Maybe get if it involves sticky tape, get the sticky tape and show it.
Yes,
Get it. That's good. Hey, we're winging this. So you see, I'm pinching it together.
It works particularly well on long seams. So if you imagine these, if you imagine we're trying to glue these two bits together, like that. So we've made like some sort of big object and they're the two seams. Beauty of this method is they can be like wooden seams and all sorts.
Yeah, you wouldn't do this with gaffer tape normally. You just use regular tape.
I just use masking tape.
You're using gaffer tape, so that's all we would have.
So what I do is I put the seams together. I'll put little markers on the edge.
So if you just
put the seams
watch
together
what I'm
without
doing
glue.
here first. You see I've blobbed it on quite thick. That's way too thick. So you basically scrape it all off. So it's just this thin coat along the edge. What's left I can use to put on the other side. One of the nice things with Zote and with other foams is you don't have to use them as is. You can clad them which is a very popular thing to do. Have you heard of the Japanese cosplay Goldie?
No.
Basically, he makes these magnificent sort of robot and armoured costumes out of, not quite zote, but similar foam, slightly denser, but it's the very similar principle, but he clads them in vinyl fabrics. So he'll cover the surface in like a vinyl fabric and make this beautiful sort of professional metallic looking finish. But underneath, it's just the same stuff as this, more or less. Very similar.
So yeah, so if you like doing a big seam using any glue really, you can do this again with hot glue. So what I do is I tape across and then I tape down long ways, so the whole seam where you're going to be gluing has a piece of tape on it and it's covered. So this is the top surface, this will be like the finish surface on the outside, this will be the inside.
Yeah, you
so
wouldn't use gaffer tape because the gaffer tape can chew up the foam a bit and
Yeah.
it's more expensive,
Yeah.
but we're just using it as a
So
demo.
you just use masking tape. So you inverse it, so this is the inside, this is the edge that you're going to be gluing. You put the glue on, you let it, yeah, I suppose we could do that. Just give the nice
You could
people
actually put the
different
glue
bits
on.
of foam. Yeah, this may not work because it may bite onto the.
Should be fine.
It may bite onto the tape a little bit harder than I'd appreciate it to. We'd
Yeah.
let people play around with the glue if it wasn't so hideously toxic.
It's not the worst, you know, it's a solvent-based glue. You don't want to go huffing it in quantity. A tiny little whiff of it isn't going to hurt you, but if you're using it in sufficient quantity to do armour with, you really do want to be investing in a respirator, proper one, with removable cartridges.
It's actually a lot better than it used to be. It used to have toluene in it.
But I mean, that was years ago, that's before we started using it,
No,
I
it
think.
wasn't.
I don't think the British formula don't have toluene.
No, it did. Because it had the toluene warning on it when I was making Al. Still.
Mine never did. Yeah, but it's not good. So what I'm doing now is I'm doing the long seams. I'll do these one at a time. Again, spreading it.
Okay, this isn't actually working as well as I'd hope it. Clearly, duct tape actually has a adhesive on it that reacts with the solvent. In this, it's actually coming away quite a bit, and it's not working.
You're also putting loads on.
You kind of have to because you kind of have to spread it, but the idea is going to be there.
Prince.
Anyway. What you can do.
Dude, don't heat gun it. You'll die. We will surely die.
What you can do is turn the power on so you actually have electricity.
No, dude, seriously, don't heat gun it. I don't want you to heat gun it. He's heat gunning it. Don't heat gun it. No, I'm telling them at home.
Oh,
don't
right.
heat gun it.
Would a hairdryer be okay?
Don't. There's no point.
Okay.
This stuff dries very quickly, even in the
Basically,
winter.
yeah.
It's solvent based. It
Or
doesn't
for
hang
anything
around.
that would require a heat gun, would a hairdryer be okay?
In general,
Oh, yeah.
yes. When we're working with, because we're showing you some heat forming stuff. For the heat forming stuff, yeah, hairdryer is absolutely fine. This stuff doesn't need to get to a particularly high temperature to be heat formable. So
So this is going to be a terrible example because I'm not going to be able to take the tape off because the tape is going to glue itself to the glue, and it's all kind of stretched and melted a bit, so
Yeah, dude,
it
you're
kind
bad
of
at this.
doesn't work. I'm really good at it. I've just got the wrong tape. So all you do is you inverse it back again, and if you'd used masking tape like a clever person, unlike Zay, who is tired. Yeah, so you can inverse it back. So what you end up with is you end up with a perfect seam.
try taking the tape off, see what happens.
Not yet, you have to kind of
Yeah,
wait
you have
for
to
about
wait for a
an hour.
So
Whilst it sets
We can
properly.
already see the glue.
yeah,
Yeah, you do get gluey edges. There's nothing much really you can do about that. But in principle, if you'd done that with masking tape, and I'd done that with masking tape, what you'd get is you'd get a perfect join. And if you don't get a perfect join, what you can do is you can just put a strip over the top of something and hide it. What I do a lot of the time is if I'm making something armoury out of this, is I'll do the seams across decorative edges. So like if you've got a helmet and the helmet has like ridges on it, I'll do the seams under where the ridges will go, so it all hides it away. And if it doesn't, try and get away with artistic liberty. Put ridges in anyway, just to hide the seams.
If you're working with both foam and warbler, what's the best way to join the two together?
I've never used Warbler, but
I've never used Warbler, but I'd say that
in general, if you're working with foam, Evo Stick is
basically I'd test this on Warbler, make sure it doesn't just like
dissolve.
turn Warbler into goo. It shouldn't, because Warbler's just, I'm pretty sure Warbler's just thermoplastic.
Warbler sticks to stuff though, it's got a sticky side. It will just stick to like foam and things.
I'm pretty sure Warbler is just a thermoplast with, I'm fairly certain it's just a wood base.
It's wood pulp, I think,
Yeah.
or something like that, yeah.
I've never used it.
I'm fairly certain it's just basically hot glue and wood pulp mixed together, which is really, really difficult to do, so don't try it at home. But that's basically what it is. That's why it sands so well. So yeah, so in theory, I mean, I've impact adhesived hot glue and I've impact adhesive wood, and the results have been fine. So in theory, if you impact adhesive a wood hot glue composite, should be fine. But test it first. Get a piece, stick some glue on it, see what happens.
Do it while wearing your respirator in case it releases noxious gases.
Or outside. Respirator isn't necessary if you're working outside and being sensible.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't use a respirator for the first several projects.
Well, I mean,
worked with it, and
Rich used to do swords in literally
The
something
bathroom.
the size of a broom cupboard, often with
Yeah.
the door closed, and he hasn't died yet, so... But, yeah,
Basically, a lot of it is common sense. If it starts making you feel really, really sick, don't go,
Yeah.
oh, I'll gut it out. And
You see, that's new, that sign. I think they've changed the signage.
they
used
changed
to be
the,
the
well, they
X's.
changed the formula all the time in it.
No, but I've never seen the exclamation point. I've only ever seen an X or a harmful.
There's
Irritant and harmful.
is exclamation mark safe or bad?
It's not going to be good. But I've never seen that
Is
particular...
it safer than X or
I've no
bad
idea.
or-
I've never seen it before. I think they've changed the way that...
Google will know.
Yeah.
Google knows
Ask
all.
the Google.
I think the laws on the signage have changed rather than the formula of the glue is my point.
Right, it's probably an EU directive.
It probably is.
Bullshitty. I'll get some nice new pieces of Sintra for those people who don't stop Sintra on
Sintra.
Not Sintra.
So,
Plastazote.
so if
Sintra
one was
is technically a foam.
if one was working this foam, this is what we always use. If you change out the blade, sorry, that's good.
Wait a minute, we're having the moment of truth. It's kind of ripping up the surface because it's duct tape, but it's actually splitting, so you'll be able to see roughly what I was getting at.
Does anyone have any questions while we're passing it out? That's not too bad.
So yeah, so this is far too harsh a tape to be using, so never ever use duct tape because, as you see, it's just completely mullered the surface. But you get the principle of the idea. It's you've given yourself like a really, really nice seam. You've joined two pieces together, and like I say, what this is great for is if you're making a curved piece. So if you imagine, the simplest way is if you like take a quarter circle and you want to join those two quarter circles together on the curved edges, what you can do is you can basically go, right, okay, so...
Do it. Make one.
Yeah, I mean, sorry, I'll get you more pieces of plastazote. So yeah, so if you're going to join, if you want to join these two pieces to make a nice curved piece, what you can literally do is get a piece of tape.
Where would you buy this type of gun?
This, there you go. Wait a sec.
Yeah, where would we buy this? All over the place. Just
Internet.
Just check internet.
We get all of ours online, and we're not very consistent with our suppliers. We just find it's called plastazote. 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 I believe this is LD45. There are different
Yes.
densities
And different thicknesses.
Obviously different thicknesses. But the different thicknesses are just different amounts shaved off the giant block that they make in the factory. The different grades are different weights, like paper, grams per square metre or whatever. So, there's different grades of Zote as well as different thicknesses. I think this is probably 4mm LD45.
Yeah. You can get it every thickness.
I believe
from...
LD45 means it weighs 45 kilos per cubic metre, right?
Yes.
Something like that.
So again, I've kind of done this slapdashing a lot faster than I'd normally do it. But if we imagine that I've glued that edge, glued it together. When you finally glue it together, if you pop it out, oh, beautiful curved surface. So yeah, that's the beauty of taping your seams.
See, this here at the back is a demo of what happens when it's not quite ready. See, it's gaping like a little mouth on the edge. That's because I haven't let it set properly before trying to press it together. So I'll leave that gaping for a little while before I fix it. But the nice thing is you can fix it very easily. To fix it, I would just slice off the worst of the glue, put a little bit more in, let it set properly, pinch it back together. It's quite easy to fix. So yeah, I would just go in with the
All
plastazote.
plastazote on this table, people are welcome.
So do you want to show
pieces
people
of it.
how to cut and carve, surface carve plastazote with? That's a fresh blade.
Yeah, so it's...
Everyone can come closer, there's plenty of space if we just squeeze around a bit more because we're doing a demo.
So one of the
She
one of the other
doesn't
things
have the
you'll find with plastazote is it actually
Grab
carves
yourself a
really
piece of
nicely.
Zote as well
So
if you want to take it home and have a play.
Yeah, everyone's aware.
There's plenty to go around.
if I just slice with the scalpel, it slices like butter. So you can get sharp edges.
What's the rules with scalpels, would it say?
Don't cut yourself.
No, the rules are, if possible, cut away from yourself. Use the sharpest blade possible. The blunter the blade, the more dangerous the scalpel. It's a little bit counterintuitive, but the blunter the blade, the more likely you are to have to press too hard, the more likely it is to snag, the more likely you are to take risks because it's not behaving. Whereas when it's absolutely brand new, it just goes straight through and you have absolute control. We get the blades, you can get 100 blades for a tenner, so they're about 10p each when you get them in bulk.
Yeah, always have more blades than you ever think you'll need because
You'll get through them.
Are they the same as the marquetry blades?
This is a Swan Morton surgical style scalpel. These are the ones you get in dissection kits at universities. And you can buy them easily. They're about £3 for the handle and about, as I said, a few pence each for the blades.
I mean, at home I have a
Yes.
nice craft blade handle.
Right.
I have like a proper, beautiful.
We should be alright actually, because it's just going to be loads of bits of
just
foam,
use
so it's going to be a
this
pain
as
to clear
well,
up, but it'll
so-
be a pain whether it's on a tarp or not.
Yeah, I mean, it's personal preference on
Yeah.
the blade handle. It's also personal preference on the blade type because there's loads of different shapes of blade. You can get them a lot more
You can get the
angled
fat
that way.
ones
You
or the
can
really
get-
pointy
or
ones.
You can get them quite thick as well.
You get the 10As and the 22s.
You can get them with rounded
What it is worth
blades,
remembering
all
is there are
sorts.
two handles that take different blade
Yeah.
sizes.
There's also two different ways of fitting. So this is basically like a hot fit one, which has got a hole, and then on this it's got like a little prong.
Just clicks
So
in.
you be very, very careful, and you don't obviously push the tip because it'll just go into your finger. So you hold it tight by pinching, and then slowly just clip it on. And there's just like a clip system. So you sort of see from the side, it's got like it curls up and then pop, clips on, and it won't come off. Always check your blade as well. Make
Yeah.
sure your blade.
But there are lots of brands of scalpel and blade, but really I would say that the Swan Morton, it's basically industry standard.
Yeah.
You can get them all over the place. We get all ours online, but you can buy them in art shops. They just cost twice as much.
So something you can do.
They come in little they're surgical, but they're non-sterile. They come in these little packs. You get 5 blades, each in their own little thing. Make sure when you dispose of them, I tend to, in fact I don't even dispose of them, I still have all the old blades I've ever had because I don't know where to bin them, but get yourself a container, that's your sharp spin, and just keep your hands out of it.
So something else you can do with plastazote, which is really nice, is it surface carves really nicely. So let's say you're making a beautiful sword and it's got a beautiful little pattern on it. What you can do is, ideally, what you do is you draw on it.
Have we got pens?
Have we got biros?
No, but I've got permanent markers.
So we've got a biro on them.
I think I've got
It's not biro, but it's
Ballpoint.
Biro would work better.
Give it on the try.
Beautiful.
Like.
I just use regular ballpoint biros because you can draw on plastazote and it's great. So let's imagine sometimes it takes a few times to get it working. Yeah. So let's say we're making like a little floral insignia on it. So what you do is you draw the little thing. Let's say that ends in a flower. Then you give it the width. Again, I'm doing this really haphazardly. Normally I'd spend hours meticulously working it out. So, and what we want is we want that to look like it's carved out. So, let's use this now because this is pretty scrappy. So you want it to look like that in a cross section. So this is the surface of the zote, and this is the relief, a little V-shaped relief. So what I do is I just work out where I'm going to start. I've just made this really difficult for myself, and you just kind of like a little tiny sewing action just to get started.
So you're cutting down into the foam, up
Yeah.
from the foam.
And I just kind of do little rocking motions like that, very, very gently, very tiny, tiny moves.
Whereas I just go.
Yeah, again, this is kind of preference. Also,
Yeah.
this zote's a bit thin for this job. Normally, you'd surface carve into slightly thicker foam.
That's what I do.
Yeah, so once you go in, you can just kind of like glide it around.
Yeah, a lot of it, you know, as you can see, we're all doing it slightly differently here.
There's no right way to do
There's no right
this.
way or wrong way. Well, there are wrong ways, because you cut yourself.
And then you just go down the other side, and if I was doing this
Yeah,
beautifully
so
and
pass that around.
properly,
There's basically a lot of different ways you can do it, and obviously, as you can see, you end up with.
you end up with. I'm not going to go all the way around, but you end up with a little.
Yeah, see, you're carving in, whereas I'm leaving relief. But basically, you can carve it. Now, how would one finish foams, eh?
Depends on what they're going to do with
Indeed.
it.
What are some
So,
ways?
if it was armour, you've got several options. The sort of like the traditional option, which is the one that I sort of brought to UK Cosplay, was covering it in, was using the LARP method, which is covering it in latex. Then you spray paint it, and then you top coat it with a absolutely vile material called Isoflex.
Yeah. That is an
which,
issue onto
which
respirators,
is
but-
murder in a tin. It is out to take your life and sit on a throne of
Yeah.
skulls.
You don't actually need the Isoflex for cosplay
Yeah, you don't
purposes.
really need it, but it does make it look nice afterwards because it gives it a beautiful shiny finish.
Yeah, Isoflex is a sort of industrial grade roofing sealant.
You can only get it. You can only get it at certain B&Qs,
Because
and
you
even,
need the clear stuff, you can't use the black stuff because that's useless.
And even then, when you are buying it, if you look young, make sure you take ID because it is one of the things that they go, "Are you 21?" No, really, are you 21?
So,
I need to see
I finished
ID.
Pikachu head, if you want to pass that round. So, how did I make that? I went online and searched Papercraft Pikachu. Found a Papercraft pattern. Papercraft patterns have tabs on the side. Get rid of those, you don't need them. Why don't you need them? Paper is flat, so it needs to go like that. Foam has 3 dimensions, so it can glue just side to side. Cut the tabs off completely. Then what I did is I smoothed off quite a few of the curves. Has anyone seen a Papercraft pattern sort of flattened out? They've usually got quite jaggy edges. With foam, because it's soft and it's got a bit of give to it, you don't need that jagginess that paper needs because paper works in flat sheets. So you can kind of smooth it off. You don't want to smooth it off too much or your shape goes to pot. But if you just smooth it off a little bit, and just in the areas where it's necessary, it really does create a much smoother surface. And then basically I printed that out, cut it out, transferred it to the zote, and went from there.
This round.
And to cut it, I used a scalpel, and I was pressing. I was making. You don't want to hold the scalpel like that. You don't want to hold it like that for this purpose.
Yeah.
However, if you wanted to make a ridge in your armour, you could cut it like that at an angle, and then if you attach it edge to edge, you've suddenly got a bevel, like woodwork. That is a way of getting nice ridged edges.
Yeah.
And again, that's not something that papercraft will prepare you for, because the papercraft obviously is assuming that paper has 0 thickness. You're right.
And it just needs to stand up.
Sure.
Also put the drink
So, I'm closing this up now. I'll take that home and glue things with it. Any questions? Sorry? This is Evo Stick Impact. It is fairly toxic. What are the warnings on this one? Flammable, liquid and vapor. Flammable, liquid and vapor. Causes skin irritation. Causes serious eye irritation. May cause drowsiness and dizziness. Avoid release to the environment. Wear protective gloves, protective clothing, eye protection, face protection. If in eyes, yada 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 yada. May cause an allergic reaction. As you can see, I've got it all over my hands. Don't do that. However, I've tried working with it with gloves, and it's just such a huge fucking pain.
Really difficult when you're doing fine little fiddly
It is
things
better
and
if
you're not.
I am going to advise you officially wear gloves with it. I'm going to tell you, as a person who uses it, it's difficult to do when you wear gloves with it, but you still should. That's just life, unfortunately.
You can get something similar to that. It's Evo Stick, it's in a tin.
Yep.
It looks like PVA and it doesn't smell at all. It's
That's
wonderful
because that's the
stuff.
solvent-free stuff. It doesn't work as well on foam, unfortunately. There's a reason that it's had solvent in for decades. It's because it works better. I have tried the solvent-free stuff, and it doesn't really behave properly, especially for Zote. It's not so bad for the soft foams, but for Zote, I've never managed to get it to work. So, any questions about the sort of flat, thin foams? Oh, we haven't done the heat form.
We haven't done the heat
Right.
form. I don't think we've got a big enough piece.
We've got plenty. That piece will do it.
Just use a little piece.
Yeah.
This will be fine.
Right.
Then
So, we're going to try some heat forming. So, one way of getting a nice weird curve like that is to use a papercraft pattern. You can see there's curves there. They're a little bit, the curves, they're a little bit jaggy because it's a papercraft pattern. It's not infinite, but they're a lot less jaggy than they would be for papercraft because I've curved off the edges. I have a friend who makes fursuit heads, and what he does, he's a 3D modeler by trade. He will 3D model the head, flatten it out on the computer, print it, transfer it to thicker plastazote, and literally rebuild the thing in real life. And that is actually, if you are someone who can 3D model and who knows how to use the computer programs, that's kind of a cool way of making crazy shapes.
Way more time consuming.
Sorry?
I do 3D modelling.
Yeah.
It's way more time consuming.
Well, it depends. If you're doing low poly and quite simple stuff, and if you just get to... This is here for a reason. That's to stop you bending
No,
the table.
that's on the chair for a reason. I'm going to put it on there and use. I'm going to heat it by hand.
Oh, okay,
Heat it in my hand, then I'm going to use that.
What are we
to
forming over?
this random object that I found. What is it?
It looks like a
Yeah.
Wheel on.
Anyway, so you want this for a little nodule on a piece of armour or something. So, no, that's not what I need at all. Just
Just do it.
put
Right.
it where it put
No!
Right, so
Leave me alone. I'm tired.
you can heat plastazote in an oven as long as you don't cook it to death. Well, it actually heats quite well and it heats consistently and it goes quite squidgy and floppy.
Does it give off any vapours when you heat it?
Probably.
A little bit.
If you don't do
It's fine.
Yeah, but you're not heating it very hard. If you don't know, assume it does, basically.
Yeah, low heats. I mean, you can heat it with a hairdryer, but it goes fairly floppy. And then if you stick it on a soft surface and push something into it, this isn't going to work well. I normally use a nice big cushion when I'm doing it.
We do have friends who've done this with a vacuum former. You can do foam on a vacuum former, and it actually works extremely well. Oh, it worked quite nicely. Obviously, it's bobbly because it was on a towel.
Yeah.
Good for texture.
Yeah. But there you go, and you can see that's actually deformed into that. Pass that around.
How long does it take after you've stopped heating it for it to...
Seconds.
Not long at all.
It sheds heat very
hold
quickly.
Hold it in place. Obviously, don't be doing it next to the fire or something, because it's just going to keep on heating it back up again.
But yeah, I didn't.
Oh yeah, that's actually an important thing to know about plastazote. So you've made your beautiful thing out of plastazote. Don't stick it by the radiator.
Yeah, don't leave it in a hot
Because
car.
you've made like a beautiful piece of like armour chest plate, and you stick it like sideways next to a piece of armour, it will do that.
Yeah. And actually, plastazote, if in terms of long-term storage, it does tend to relax over the
It's like-
years.
There you go. That piece has been folded. That we've not encouraged that to happen
It's
at
just
all.
yeah, that's just the way it was stored.
It's better to just find a nice big box, put it in the big box.
Or ideally, if you've got like a chest piece, store it on a dummy.
Yeah,
Maybe store it with a cushion inside it,
Yeah.
something like that. But you want to store it in as close to what it'll be when you wear it as possible. So if you've got like a head, store it on a wig head. If you've got a helmet or something, it'll just make it last longer. So yeah, there's Pikachu head
Has anybody got any random questions about plastazote?
and its allies. There are other brands of foam. There's some of like the jigsaw foam.
Yeah. So that's what I'm
Yeah.
basically going to go on to next.
How much would you say is a metre of it?
Ah, right. It comes in large sheets. The ones we tend to buy are in multiples of 1 by 1.5 metres, but you can get half sheets and quarter sheets.
And you can get it like 2 meters, but
Yeah.
it's weird.
I think the sort of bread loaf that they make in the big foam factory is like 2 by 1.5 metres.
I think so. Yeah.
The standard sheet is then half of that, 1 by 1.5 metres.
They basically make it in a great big chamber. They just fill it with the material. The material expands.
Like a bread maker.
Yeah.
And then they slice it and dice it. For a standard 1 by 1.5 sheet, for 3mm, I think it's about 7 or 8 quid. For 25mm, it's about 30 quid. You know, it does multiply fairly consistently for the thickness. So if it's twice as thick, it's about twice as much for the sheet. I think 10mm is what, about 13 quid?
10 mil. Yeah. I mean, you want to be working for this sort of stuff. You want to be working maximum 5 mil, 6 mil at a push.
For bigger armour, I think 10 is okay.
No.
8 or 9. Well, it's
Alan Briarios were both made in 5 mil.
yeah. I tend to go for slightly thicker stuff. He tends to go for slightly thinner stuff. To an extent, it's personal preference. So
I mean,
there's no correct
One
or
of
wrong
the
answer.
one of the points
they're
in
different to
doing
work
this
with.
is it's a really nice light material to work with. It flexes if you poke yourself with it. You're not going to hurt anyone with it. It's lightweight. You can move around in it. And yeah, it's just a friendlier material
Yeah.
than say if you're going to work with
Fiberglass.
or Sintra
Even Warbler.
or
Yeah, because Warbler's
even
rigid
Warbler,
and
'cause Warbler's
spiky
rigid.
and all that sort of thing.
because yeah, I mean I find Warbler a better material. I mean, okay, I've not used it, but I personally use it for decorative reasons. I wouldn't make like a whole costume out of it. I'd use it for the accents and the detailing.
If nothing else, Warbler's very expensive.
It's very expensive.
Yes.
So I was going to let you finish.
Oh, sorry.
How well does it take like paint and things?
Right, what we were saying before is what we tend to do when you're doing a large piece of armour is you'll want to paint it in latex or latex mixed with paint.
Or a flexible paint.
Yeah, it needs to be a flexible paint. It does take paint well, but if you just paint it with regular paint, it will flake off over time. If you paint it with latex, it will eventually sort of peel, but because the latex bonds to itself very well, and you can make it quite thick, doing a latex covering works better and is more durable, but it won't last forever.
You need to.
Does
Plastic
plastic work? Or does it flake?
I've never even tried, but I mean, what you can do.
With anything solvent-based, test it first to make sure it doesn't melt the stuff.
So
This is less melty than polystyrene, but it still can melt
Some-
on various solvents.
Something you can do, but it's very, very
everyone seen
painstaking,
Pikachu?
and you
Yeah.
run the risk of getting surface imperfections. Is you can get rubber cement, specifically rubber cement, not that stuff that's basically latex. Copydex, not Copydex.
Right, we're coming up
It's
to quarter
actually-
two. We should
okay.
start playing with the bulk foam. Right.
I've got something to do yet, Karen.
What's that?
talk about this and then show the upgraded version of what we just talked
We've
about.
only got 15 minutes left, and I want them to have a chance
Really?
to play. Yes, that's what I just
Okay.
said.
Okay, right. So, yeah, basically, you can cover plastazote with a glue. You can cover it with Stick and then paint on top of that, but it's a tricky thing to do. But it is an option.
If you were doing something like an orc, who's meant to look all rough and ready, that's fine. But if you're doing something that wants to look harsh, it's not so good.
So this, technically, is an upgraded version of working with plastazote, because this is sheet foam used in exactly the same way and then covered in fabric. Basically because I needed a great big object that had a lot more structure to it. So,
Similar to the stuff you use like for car seats.
yeah, it's just upholstery foam. This was weird upholstery foam because it had a nice plastic surface on it, so it was nice and rigid. But yeah, so this is just regular upholstery foam inside. That's just regular upholstery foam for the peg. Regular upholstery foam, cut into shape, and glued together basically exactly the same way that this is. Obviously I had to make the pattern for this myself. And then that's just covered in fabric. That's, I want to say felt. I think.
Yeah, it's felt.
Can't remember, it's been a long time. But yeah, so, I mean that's the sort of like the scale of things that you can make in foam. And you'd be amazed at what even professionals use foam for to just make.
Yeah, one of the, if you see the Pikachu head, imagine that you want to make a Pikachu mascot costume. You could use the exact same principle there, scale it up, but instead of using zote, or instead of using thin zote like that, you'd either use very thick plastazote, or thick other closed cell foams, or you use an open cell foam like this in sheets. So 1 inch thick sheet can be treated exactly the same as that. You could make quite a nice large Pikachu head simply by getting that Pepakura pattern, scaling it up, and instead of tracing it onto a tiny piece of zote, tracing it onto a great big piece of sort of 2 inch, you could probably use 1 or 2 inch thick foam for that.
Yeah.